Amazing transformation. How a single dad revealed the hidden power of compassion to a CEO in need. Jake stood beside his old sedan, just outside his cramped garage, the vibrant energy of the local business fair swirling around him like a storm. The engine had sputtered and coughed moments before they were meant to leave, and panic seeped through him like oil on a mechanic's floor. Every greasy hand he'd shaken, every spare dime he saved, flashed in his mind. He wasn't just a mechanic, he was a single dad fighting tooth and nail for his daughter. "I can't let her down," he muttered, every word laced with desperation. Lily's spirited voice collided with his thoughts as she rummaged through her backpack, looking for her charger. "Dad, why can't you fix it?" she asked, an eyebrow raised, showing impatience. He focused on her face, bright with teenage fervor, and felt the weight of all his struggles. The engine wouldn't start, but neither could their hopes for extra work at the fair. Tension built as he caught the eye of passers-by. The flicker of concern in their glances heightened the sense of failure that gnawed at him. His hands trembled with indecision. He could feel his heart race. What if we miss opportunities? As the seconds ticked away, waves of insecurity crashed over him. Would Lily remember this day as a failed attempt or a lesson in perseverance? He closed his eyes, fighting an inner battle. His spirit wrestled with feelings of inadequacy. "You should be better than this," he chided himself between heavy breaths. Before he could gather his thoughts, a stranger approached, a well-dressed man, the sort that exuded confidence and wealth. Could that be Hope, or just the ticking clock pushing down his sanity? "Need a hand?" the stranger asked, and Jake's instinct told him to refuse the pity. But something about the man's demeanor struck him. With hesitant grace, he nodded, allowing vulnerability to seep through his tough facade. "Name's Michael Hartman," the man introduced himself, the hint of weariness in his polished voice. As the conversation unfolded, Jake found an unexpected companionship bearing down on him. Michael needed to vent. He spoke of corporate pressures, tight margins, and the crushing weight of an uncertain future. Jake listened intently while his own troubles loomed large, casting shadows over every word. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Michael listened to Jake speak about the struggles of fatherhood and the relentless pursuit to teach Lily values. The connection felt raw, almost electric. It struck Jake that a man like Michael, with all his wealth, seemed to lack what he cherished most: authentic connection and compassion. Yet doubt clawed at Jake. Could he, a simple mechanic, really propose solutions to a high-tech firm on the brink of collapse? What if he failed not just as a father but as a human trying to reach out? The air grew heavy with unresolved questions. The stakes had never felt higher. Could Michael transcend the cutthroat corporate expectations for a life woven with empathy? The bustling fair continued around them, but within Jake's chest, his heart raced with anguished uncertainty about their intertwined fates. Each moment deepened the escalating tension, leaving both men confronting their own identities. Would Michael pursue the unforgiving path of business, or could he risk embracing a new vision inspired by the bond forged between them? Jake could only wait, pacing between hope and dread, sensing the gnawing possibility that everything could change if only someone dared to reach for strength. Through compassion. The air hummed with unspoken tension as Jake stared at Michael, searching for the thread that connected them. A subtle tilt in Michael's posture revealed he was wrestling with his own fears. Perhaps they were not so different. Both faced mounds of expectations, one from a high-stakes corporate world and the other from the innocent love of a child. "Jake," Michael finally broke the silence, struggling to find the right words. "I've been in boardrooms where all the focus was on profits, but I never felt fulfilled. It's like there's something more to this life I'm missing." The vulnerability in Michael's admission struck Jake deeply. He realized at that moment that success was not just in financial gain, It was about understanding and connection. Inside his chest, something began to shift. Could his life experiences, his sacrifices, and the lessons learned through fatherhood have more value than he ever acknowledged? In that spirit, Jake found himself stepping out of his comfort zone. I'm no expert, but I've learned that it's our connections that truly matter. Being a dad taught me compassion not just for Lily but for every struggle we face. The determination surged within him. Maybe he did have something worthwhile to offer. Maybe he could inspire a different vision for Michael's company. Michael listened intently. What if we shared that message with my team? I've always held back on my personal stories. Maybe that vulnerability could spark something more in our work culture. His eyes lit up with a mix of fear and excitement. Jake pondered this proposition. Delivering a talk about compassion to corporate professionals was uncharted territory. Would they dismiss his insights simply because of his background? The risk loomed large. But he recalled the way Lily looked at him, hopeful and trusting. If it could help just one person, it's worth it, he thought. The thought of impacting lives deepened his resolve, igniting a passion he hadn't felt in years. Jake set a course. Let us do it. We can plan something where you open up about your pressures first, then I can share how compassion has reshaped my role as a father and mechanic. The idea took root. This was the bridge between their worlds, one laden with responsibility and the other laden with corporate dread. As they began to plot the framework of their combined presentation, hope intertwined with a growing sense of agency. Perhaps Jake was more than a mechanic. Perhaps he could reshape the narrative around what success meant. His life experiences could inspire corporate leaders to value connection over mere numbers. Yet reality tempered his enthusiasm. The fear of failure bubbled beneath the surface. The voices of self-doubt emerged, whispering, "What if they laugh? What if they don't see your worth?" Each perturbing thought mirrored the anxious thrum of the nearby crowd, dulling the excitement sparking between him and Michael. "Are you sure you want to put yourself in this position?" Jake's internal critic spoke loudly now. "Yes," he countered. "I can't keep quaking in fear. I need to step out. This is how I can be the father I want to be." As they solidified their plans, the day turned into night. Stars emerged, and Jake found solace in the dark sky, reflecting on the journey ahead. Infusing compassion into a corporate environment would be a tall order. But perhaps it was time to step into who he truly was, an advocate for connection in a world often bereft of it. The gravity of their enterprise loomed again, a dual-edged sword. Vulnerability could lead to intimacy but also to potential rejection. Jake's heart still pounded with uncertainty as realization set in. He was on the precipice of a transformation. The change could substantially transform Michael's perspective but also internally shake the foundations of who Jake believed himself to be. With determination rising, he met Michael's eyes, committing to this new endeavor. "Let us make a difference," Jake declared, ready to embrace the fear. But as they exchanged glances, the niggling question in Jake's heart lingered: could he really wield his story as a catalyst for change, or would the weight of corporate expectations extinguish their budding vision? The coming days would demand more than courage. They would demand all of him. For in the depths of their distinct yet intertwined journeys lay the potential for profound metamorphosis, a chance to redefine not just business but what it meant to truly connect. As the night drew on, Jake's thoughts churned with uncertainty and excitement. What awaited them at the crossroads of their lives would either redefine success or reinforce their fears. The following days passed with an unnerving blend of anticipation and anxiety. Jake found himself consumed by the idea of speaking in front of Michael's team. Each morning, he awoke with a knot in his stomach, the weight of uncertainty heavy on his chest. Would his message resonate with a group accustomed to polished presentations and expected outcomes? The mere thought made him sweat. Yet beneath the surface of that anxiety simmered a growing sense of purpose. Focus on the connection, he reminded himself. The words echoed in his mind as he crafted his narrative, drawing upon raw moments from his life as a father. He envisioned standing before that boardroom, a stark contrast to the grease and tools in his garage, yet somehow connected through the experiences that shaped him. Sitting alone one afternoon in a diner, he began writing his speech on a napkin, letting the ink flow the way the thoughts poured from his heart. Compassion isn't weakness, he scribbled, pausing to breathe deeply. It's an act of strength. The bold declaration felt strangely liberating. For the first time, he glimpsed a reflection of his own worth beyond the metal he usually manipulated. As he pored over his words, he stumbled upon a revelation. In sharing his stories of challenges, whether fixing a broken-down car late at night for a single mom or navigating Lily's teething pains, he saw the duality of intensity, the joy and the struggle. Every experience held a lesson not only for him but also for others. Perhaps those lessons were the bridge Michael sought to build within his company. Are you willing to take this leap? He questioned himself again. What if the audience responded with ridicule instead of recognition? What if they connected more with profit than with parenthood? Beneath the surface of these fears lurked a deeper truth. What lay ahead was more than speaking. It was sharing a vision, a life ethos steeped in connection over profit margins. Finally, Jake seized the quiet moment at the diner. He reminded himself that every time he had a heartfelt conversation with a fellow parent, or when a customer left the garage with a smile, those moments proved his worth. Those exchanges taught him resilience far beyond any corporate boardroom could convey. He took a deep breath, envisioning Michael and the team ready to listen. What if they're waiting for someone brave enough to speak? A sense of calm penetrated the storm. He had a message that much was clear. However, the pressure began creeping in again. He had to find a way to frame his narrative to appeal to an unfamiliar audience. What does compassion look like in their lives? He mused, reflecting on the countless meetings Michael had confided in him about a barrage of reports and performance metrics. Jake scrolled through his notes, concentrating on the intersection of personal and professional lives. Michael's invitation to this dialogue was a testament to the belief he placed in Jake's perspective, but the real work was extending that belief to a larger group. The night before their presentation, Jake practiced in front of the mirror, fighting off jitters. Every facial expression he conjured was an attempt to build a narrative capable of cutting through corporate jargon, delivering something rooted in authenticity. Yet, as he rehearsed, doubt crept in. What if you make a fool of yourself? Echoed in his mind. Before he could spiral, he anchored himself with a memory of Lily's laughter. Her innocent joy and simple moments reminded him that connection often thrived in vulnerability. Morning arrived. The day posed a reckoning, a moment of truth that would shape both personal and professional trajectories. He stood outside the meeting room, heart racing, and gripped the door handle. With a final deep breath, he stepped inside, feeling like a man poised on the edge of a diving board, uncertain yet exhilarated by the plunge ahead. Jake's eyes met Michael's, and immediately, strength coursed through him. They had harnessed the power to redefine not just their lives but also the narrative of the corporate environment. It was time to embrace the fear and give it a voice. As he took the first step forward, a new question loomed large in his mind. Would they welcome his honesty, or would doubt drown out the message he was so eager to share? The answer lay just beyond the threshold of vulnerability, waiting for him to uncover it. The air inside the boardroom felt electric, tinged with hushed conversations and scrutinizing eyes as Jake took his place at the front. He hadn't anticipated how utterly foreign the corporate landscape would feel, yet there he stood, an unlikely figure among sharp suits and polished shoes. The glass walls echoed muted sounds of the bustling office just beyond, contrasting deeply with the serenity he found in his late-night garage projects. With Michael's encouraging nod lingering in his mind, Jake steadied himself, his heart thundering. People often spoke of performance anxiety. Jake's was layered with a potent brew of vulnerability and urgency. He didn't merely want to speak, he needed to. He realized he was not the only one holding on to unvoiced truths. Perhaps the team was grappling with their own hidden fractures, uncertainties cloaked beneath professional facades. As he began, the carefully constructed paragraphs he had woven together began to dissolve. The ink on the napkin tried to reshape itself into something more genuine. Today, I want to talk to you not as a mechanic but as a father, he said, feeling a flicker of nervous energy transition into something warmer. There was a momentary stillness, the anticipation creating a taut line that connected him to his audience. Stories began to flow from Jake's mouth, a blend of humor and heartache, occasionally punctuated by laughter. He shared the experience of wrestling with an old engine late into the night to help a struggling parent, and how each challenge was not merely a task but a teaching moment that had drawn him closer to the essence of compassion. It isn't just about fixing cars. It's about understanding. Gradually, he noticed a shift in the room. Faces that initially leaned back in skepticism began to lean in, listening, engaged. It was a pulse of connection that he hadn't anticipated, and it sparked something deeper within him. With each story he shared, he unearthed buried pieces of himself while touching on aspects of their lives' success, failure, the quiet struggles of balancing work and personal commitments. Yet, beneath the gratifying realization that he was being heard, doubt started to surface again, casting its shadow over his progress. The specter of their expectations loomed. Could his message endure the scrutiny of metrics, of cold, hard numbers? Was the notion of compassion as an asset too idealistic for a boardroom, an unrealistic wish in a corporate machine? As he neared the conclusion of his speech, Jake paused. It was time to confront the scale of his ambition head-on. Empathy isn't a weakness, it's a catalyst for authentic innovation. His voice conveyed a sincerity born of struggle, a baptism by fear, tempered by need. Without realizing it, his personal development had transcended the walls of the room. He found himself confronting a truth that he had instinctively felt but never articulated. Compassion could serve as a strategic advantage, not a hindrance. Just then, a voice broke through the remnants of his mounting confidence. But Jake, one of the executives, interrupted, skepticism etched across his face. Can you really prove that this approach impacts our bottom line? The question hung like a laden cloud, dark and foreboding, stripping away the warmth of connection Jake had fought so hard to cultivate. For a brief moment, silence enveloped him. This was the challenge he hadn't counted on, a direct confrontation that threatened to undermine the foundation he had just constructed. Yet, in that silence, he discovered a burgeoning determination, aware that this dialogue could redefine not only his place in the corporate narrative but also the essence of their collective enterprise. Jake clasped his hands together, ready to reply. He could tell that the stakes had shifted, and his next words could either solidify his place in their understanding or send him tumbling down the precipice of doubt. What would he choose to reveal in this moment of reckoning? The answer was about to unfold, but the hesitation lingered, intensifying the air around him. How could he capture the significance of compassion when weighed against the quantified value of profit? The moment had come to test the resilience he had discovered in himself, poised at the precipice of doubt yet eager to push forward. Would he rise to the occasion? Jake felt the weight of the executive's question settle deeper than the silence that followed. A cacophony of thoughts flooded his mind as he grappled with how to answer. Did he even have the right data to back up his claims? The numbers weren't tangible yet. His argument relied on something far more intangible, the human experience. In that moment, Jake decided to embrace the discomfort rather than shy away from it. What I can tell you, he began, his voice steady and clear, is that I don't have an abundance of metrics, but I have real-life experiences. He sensed a collective inhalation in the room, and he pressed on, aware that he could either capture their attention or allow skepticism to drown him entirely. Let me bring it down to ground level for a moment. He drew the room in closer still, recalling his interactions with customers at the shop. Take a single mother, for instance. She comes in stressed, desperate for help. Instead of just fixing her car, I took a moment to listen, to offer a small reprieve from her burdens. As he spoke, he could see heads nodding slightly. Not only did I mend her vehicle, but I also connected her with resources that lifted her burdens during a challenging time. That opened a dialogue, earned her loyalty, and generated repeat business for our shop. Compassion breeds trust, and trust drives profitability. Jake felt his heart beat faster, his passion igniting the words as they spilled from his lips. There's a proven link between employee engagement and financial performance. Companies that value compassion see higher retention rates, greater customer satisfaction, and ultimately increased profit margins. It may take time to show in the numbers, but I believe we could start cultivating this culture today. A flicker of intrigue sparked in the eyes of the executives, challenging their preconceived notions about the emotional landscape of the corporate environment. Yet doubt still loomed, and Jake realized he had to confront that next. How do we pivot from established practices to embrace this? Another voice interrupted, probing into the unknown, exposing an essential fear of change. We've always been about metrics and efficiency, Jake. Compassion sounds great, but it can't replace proven strategies. Jake's mind raced, the challenge invigorating his spirit. I understand that fear. We've all been raised to think that efficiency stands at odds with empathy, that there's not enough room for both. But what if we could merge them? He felt alive, fueled by the collective presence of his audience, a partnership being forged in this very room. Imagine a workplace that doesn't just demand results but understands the human element behind them. We could create a bridge between data and emotion, where our strategies are not just numbers but reflections of our values. In that moment of fervor, Jake began to understand the depth of his own journey. This wasn't purely about persuading others. It was about carving a new path for himself, one that allowed him to embody faith and empathy as a legitimate force for change. However, the momentary clarity reflected a stark reality within. Was he buoyantly optimistic, or was he setting himself up for failure? Would he put his career on the line for an ideal that might falter under scrutiny? The questions loomed large, but he had come too far to yield to hesitation. As murmurs of consideration spread through the boardroom, he felt the spark of determination ignite deeper within. The future felt malleable, yet uncertain. I'll put my ideas to the test, not just here but with real projects that include the voice of our community, he declared, conviction solidifying his gut. But just as hope began to form, a voice from the back chimed in, slicing through the optimism. And what if it fails, Jake? What happens then? In that sharp breath of uncertainty, Jake found his gaze scanning the room, his heart pounding with urgency. He had taken the step forward, but the path ahead was yet perilous. The next crucial moment could either solidify his budding convictions or render them obsolete. What would the board's response be? Would they champion change, or would they bury his dreams beneath the suffocating weight of tradition? Jake inhaled deeply, his next words vital to his trajectory. The stakes had never been higher, and the question wasn't merely about metrics anymore, it was about his very future. How far was he willing to push, and would they choose to follow? Jake felt the tension in the boardroom thicken, a palpable silence wrapping around him as he processed the challenging question. It felt like a chasm had opened, revealing not just skepticism, but self-doubt creeping in uninvited. How could he ensure that his bold vision for the company held any weight when the foundations rested upon the precarious concepts of empathy and human connection? He paused, allowing the moment to stretch, gathering his thoughts while assessing the potential eruption of concern from his audience. He needed to address the fears erupting from that single question. What if his approach, grounded in compassion, was futile? With that in mind, he decided to pivot. What if it fails? He echoed, mirroring the voice behind the question. But what if it succeeds? The path of change is as fraught with uncertainty as it is paved with possibility. The executives shifted in their seats, the anxiety visible in their apprehensive faces. Jake recognized that they were navigating through a storm of internal conflict caught between the weight of tradition and an inclination for progress. Failure can often teach us more than our successes, he continued, building momentum. Think of every great innovation. Every risk that pushed boundaries was once met with resistance. Let us not forget that the greatest advancements come from stepping outside our comfort zones. Each sentence felt like a step forward, a deliberate move toward a vision he wanted desperately to manifest. In the past, Jake had retreated under the pressures of doubt. But today, he stood firm, driven not only by ambition but by the sincerity of his beliefs. He was done being the timid newcomer. This was his moment to stake a claim for a bold new culture of unity. We must challenge the idea that emotion and logic cannot coexist in the workplace. I want to initiate a pilot project, focused on employee wellness and customer engagement, blending metrics with emotional intelligence. Let us generate actionable insights from real interactions. The more Jake spoke, the clearer his ideas flowed, And with that clarity came an electrifying confidence that invigorated him. One of the executives then leaned forward, eyes narrowed, the skepticism unhidden. And what if this approach compromises productivity? You're essentially asking us to prioritize sentiment over results. Jake swallowed hard, fearing the coiling wrestling match within himself. He felt the heat of the challenge and embraced it. It's not just about prioritizing sentiment, it's about redefining our results. What does productivity look like when our employees feel valued and connected? Wouldn't we want to foster a place where innovation thrives naturally because people are engaged? The outcome is not just about numbers, it's about creating an environment where success isn't just quantified but celebrated. His mind raced, materializing an unexpected internal discovery about himself. He wasn't merely advocating for change, he was unearthing his leadership potential. Each hurdle breached had further illuminated a path forward, revealing a strength he had yet to acknowledge. Here he was, armed with compassion and conviction, not just as a worker but as a catalyst for deeper corporate values. The murmurings around the table began to meld into candid discussions. He sensed a shift, a gradual thawing of reluctance as a couple of others began to articulate their own thoughts on the concept. Yet his heart still raced. There remained a precarious balance to strike. Jake realized he had two choices: sustain this momentum or brace for the impending challenge of skepticism. He took another deep breath, ready for the risk, sensing a new chapter ahead filled with both opportunity and fear. Would his advocacy for compassion be enough to drive change? Or would he risk being dismissed as naive, clinging to ideals that felt intangible in a world so focused on metrics? As he prepared to articulate that pivotal moment in the project's timeline, something shifted in the back of his mind. Perhaps the true test lay not in the acceptance of his ideas but in his unwavering commitment to them regardless of the outcome. Jake straightened his posture, locking eyes with the executives and preparing for the next challenge ahead. It was time to confront the inevitable resistance that lay before him. The stakes were higher now than ever before, and as enthusiasm teetered at the edge of doubt, he felt emboldened. Would they follow where he dared to lead, or would he stand as an outlier, fighting for principles that seemed too progressive for their structured reality? The boardroom felt different now, charged with a blend of curiosity and skepticism that should have paralyzed him. Instead, it fueled Jake's determination. He had carved out a space for dialogue and opportunity to not only present ideas but to nurture collaboration. Jake could feel the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, not just for himself, but for every employee whose voice had gone unheard. The challenge beckoned like an open road, vibrant yet fraught with peril. With each query that emerged from the executives, he felt his understanding broaden, a recognition of what they truly sought. Can this really work? Was more than just a question, it was a vulnerability laid bare. They needed reassurance, a semblance of control, in a world that felt increasingly unpredictable. He began to see himself not merely as an advocate but as a bridge between the necessity for human connection and the rigid expectations of corporate performance. Let us consider the possibilities, he urged, pacing slightly before the board. When we invest in emotional intelligence, we invest in productivity. This isn't a gamble, it's an opportunity. As he spoke, he realized he was walking a fine line, articulating stakes that resonated on both personal and professional levels. Wordlessly, he traversed the minefield of their apprehensions, addressing not just the questions posed but the silent worries lurking beneath. Would his vision transform not only the company but also the way they viewed risk? It brought him back to his formative experiences, moments when he faltered under pressure, overwhelmed by expectations. This was his time to embrace those discomforts and reshape them into something constructive. Each one of us has felt undervalued at some point, maybe even in this very room, he said, allowing his voice to soften slightly. What if we took that feeling and turned it into action? This project isn't about abandoning results, it's about redefining them. Let us illustrate how engaged employees improve customer relationships, lowering churn rates and driving sales. The metrics will follow. Jake sensed the intrigue building as one of the younger executives, usually silent, leaned forward. That makes sense, But how do you measure emotional intelligence? A spark ignited within Jake. By placing it front and center. Surveys, feedback loops, even casual check-ins. There are methods to quantify engagement, just as there are to measure performance. The first step is acceptance. We need to recognize that these elements exist together. And I stand here, willing to share my insights and experiences if it means we move forward together. The acknowledgement of his vulnerability positioned him not simply as a leader but as a peer, someone who understood their struggles. It was a revelation that cut through the noise of self-doubt still circling in his mind. This was a symbiotic relationship, not a transactional one, where everyone had something to gain. An older executive who had remained more reserved than the rest finally spoke. You're asking us to change a mindset that's been in place for years. Change is hard. How do we manage the pushback? Jake felt the familiar flicker of anxiety resurface but caught it swiftly. We pilot a smaller program first. Let us take measured steps. Report data back on improvement over a set period. We can adjust course as needed, proving the merit through observable outcomes rather than fear-based assumptions. The nodding heads that followed emboldened him further, leading him to realize that his journey was about collective growth. It became clear that success didn't solely hinge on the acceptance of his ideas but in nurturing an environment that embraced risk and fostered openness. But underneath the current of excitement lay a gnawing uncertainty. How much would he need to sacrifice to uphold these values? And what would happen if he succeeded but couldn't hold the newfound trust? As his thoughts fluttered between the dangerous question marks, he straightened, feeling that decisive moment teetering precariously before him. Would they take a chance on him, or would they retreat back to the safety of entrenched practices? In this instant, he understood his role had vastly changed. He was fighting not just for a project but for a principle threaded deeply within the fabric of their corporate culture. The reckoning wasn't merely about metrics. It revolved around what it meant to genuinely connect, both as colleagues and as human beings. Jake inhaled deeply, poised to articulate the next phase, the one that would determine if he would emerge a leader or fade back into the shadows. Let us face what's ultimately at stake. The future of this company hinges not only on our performance, but our willingness to evolve. And beneath the rising tension, a new question began to ripen inside him. What if the real battle lay not against the executive's hesitations but against his own fear of falling back into the shadows of self-doubt? Jake stepped away from the boardroom, feeling the adrenaline pulse through his veins. He had ignited a conversation that felt transformative. Yet beneath the surface of his accomplishment was an ever-looming specter of fear. What if his voice faded into the backdrop of the company's traditional narrative? He needed this to matter beyond the momentary applause. In the following days, he poured himself into various research articles and case studies about emotional intelligence, crafting a more concrete outline for his pilot program. The numbers, to some degree, were necessary, a steam engine propelling the project forward, but he couldn't escape the feeling that raw data paled in comparison to the human experiences fueling them. Statistics were compelling, but stories were transformative. As he immersed himself in developing his plans, he decided to reach out to different departments, encouraging informal discussions about his vision. Each conversation opened a window into diverse perspectives. The frontline workers, often overlooked, presented a wealth of insights. It was here he discovered the complexities of their challenges. Issues he had once considered abstract grew vivid and tangible. When he gathered feedback from his colleagues, it was laced with apprehension and hope. "We've never done things this way before," they would say. "What if it all falls apart?" He empathized deeply with them, recalling his own fears about jumping into the uncharted waters of corporate change. Yet, their collective anxiety fueled his resolve. Their candidness helped him refine his approach, turning his vulnerability into a source of strength. He shared his own experiences of failure, laying the groundwork for a narrative that resonated more deeply than mere spreadsheets ever could. Amid this whirlpool of human connection, his resolve began to solidify. Each conversation was laden with unfiltered emotions that sharpened his understanding of the company culture. He realized he was gradually stepping into an authentic leadership persona, an advocate not for an abstract plan, but for real people facing real challenges. The moments of doubt still crept in, lingering like uninvited guests. What if the leaders remained unmoved by the voices below? What if they saw his efforts as a threat rather than an evolution? Jake could feel the pressure intensifying, and with it came the realization that he would need to present a compelling case not just for the project itself, but for the broader shift in company values. One afternoon, he arranged a casual meeting with a couple of senior executives, hoping to share stories that put a human face on the data. Their initial skepticism simmered, yet as he narrated the tangible impact of emotional intelligence on retention rates through shared anecdotes, he caught glimpses of their walls beginning to crack. But then, amidst the late afternoon light filtering through the windows, one of them unexpectedly challenged him. "Jake, this sounds idealistic. Why should we trust this will work in our high-stakes environment?" At that moment, a flood of doubt surged through him. Was he playing with fire, aiming for a transformation when comfort lay in the status quo? Yet he took a deep breath. Because at the core of high performance is trust. We can't measure that on a ledger, but without it, every push for results backfires. The room fell silent, waiting for reactions. He could see the gears turning, the executive's calculated gaze locked onto him. Could he really sway them, or was this just another exercise in futility? The stakes had become extraordinarily personal. This wasn't merely about leading a project. It was about reshaping the corporate belief system and reclaiming his own self-worth in the process. In that moment, Jake realized how much he had transformed. He had emerged from the depths of self-doubt into a position where he could influence the tide of the organization. But the question still gnawed at him: how much of his own identity was tied up in this journey, and was he prepared to face the consequences of success or failure? As he walked away from that meeting, a sense of urgency propelled him forward. He was not only leading a change, he was on the brink of a personal revolution. And just as the echoes of that conversation reverberated in his mind, one thought crystallized: what would happen if he unexpectedly found the courage to confront the most formidable opponent of all, the self-doubt he had battled for years? Jake returned to his desk with a swirl of thoughts competing for his attention. The conversation with the executives had been revealing, not just about the organization's culture, but about himself. His heart raced as he recalled the challenge laid before him. He understood that the next steps would be crucial not only in pushing his pilot program forward, but in confronting his own insecurities and limitations. He started mapping out a series of workshops designed to foster emotional intelligence among employees. His vision included exercises that involved storytelling, peer discussions, and role-playing scenarios wherein empathy would take center stage. Each element aimed to make emotional intelligence not just a concept, but a lived experience. As he nurtured these ideas, however, an unsettling feeling wormed its way into his thoughts. What if he failed to inspire? What if he faced more resistance the deeper he dug into this transformative process? Jake grappled with a growing sense of isolation. Each day, he devoted hours to develop material to deliver to his colleagues, but behind the meticulous preparation lay a haunting question: was he genuinely equipped to lead such a profound change? The self-doubt plagued him even more as he realized that the stakes were higher than they had ever been. One morning, he decided to carve out time to sit down with Sarah, a longtime mentor who had seen him through numerous career milestones. They shared a cup of coffee in the bustling cafe just off the office. As they spoke, Jake opened up, revealing the turmoil within his aspirations for the program, the potential backlash he feared, and the relentless self-questioning. "Jake, the strongest leaders don't have all the answers," Sarah said, her voice steady and reassuring. "What leaders do best is invite others into the conversation. You're already doing that. Trust in your approach and the people you're engaging with." Her encouragement shook him from his spiral of doubt. Wasn't he inviting vulnerability part of the process? He had shared his failures in meetings before, opening pathways for dialogue and emphasizing that learning stemmed from missteps. He realized that nurturing a culture of empathy meant allowing himself to be seen, flaws and all. After their talk, Jake returned to his desk with newfound clarity. He refocused his efforts not merely on the mechanics of his pilot program, but on embracing shared experiences. He developed a story-sharing segment for the workshops where employees could narrate their own professional challenges. By putting their struggles into context, he believed they would create a network of understanding. As the weeks progressed, the momentum began to build. The first workshop was around the corner, and anticipation buzzed in the air. Yet, in the hidden corners of his mind, the old specters of self-doubt lurked, especially as he prepared to introduce the program to senior executives again. Would they see the value? Would they understand that measuring success in KPIs might not capture the magic of a team united? On the day of the workshop, Jake stood in front of a small group of eager participants, their faces lit with curiosity. The moment felt monumental as he took a deep breath, gathering the courage to share his own story, one filled with failures, growth, and the years of feeling like an outsider in an unyielding corporate landscape. As he spoke, he noticed their initial apprehension transform into engagement. The room vibrated with a collective energy that ignited a spark of hope within him. Just as he felt a surge of confidence rising, the door swung open. In walked the senior executives, their presence commanding and unexpected. Jake's heart sank. What would they think of this informal setting? Had he just crossed a boundary, inviting the very critique he had feared? Suddenly, the stakes had elevated again, and he felt the tension shoot back into his core. Could he prove the worth of his commitment to emotional intelligence in front of those who held the keys to change? The journey was far from over, and the most significant test of his resolve loomed just ahead. Jake had to confront not just the executives, but the looming question of whether he could truly embody the change he sought to create, and with each heartbeat, the answer shifted tantalizingly just out reach. Jake stood at the podium, his heart racing as the executives settled into their seats. It wasn't just a presentation anymore. It felt like a pivotal moment in both his life and the company's journey. The atmosphere buzzed with a mixture of hope and skepticism, much like the trepidation he had felt in the early days of advocating for change. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the conviction that had propelled him forward. Today, I want to introduce you to not just a pilot program, but a transformative perspective on leadership, he began, his voice steadying with purpose. Emotional intelligence and empathy aren't just buzzwords, they can redefine our success metrics. They can connect people, inspire trust, and ultimately enhance our bottom line. The audience leaned in as Jake shared stories of employees whose spirits had been brightened through simple acts of compassion. He spoke of the mother who had walked into his garage plagued by her struggles, and how a moment of understanding had fostered not just loyalty, but genuine appreciation for what they had built together. With each story, he demonstrated tangible impacts: lower turnover rates or increased customer satisfaction that had stemmed from heartfelt connections. Empathy, he stated, translates into improved performance, trust, and ultimately, revenue. Eyes began to soften, skepticism turned to curiosity. As questions arose, he found himself thriving beneath the pressure. Executives asked how these emotional engagements would measure up against hard stats and business goals. Jake's response came naturally. What if we see employee engagement as a primary metric? A workforce that feels valued and recognized will yield better results than one driven solely by financial incentives. That ability to pivot the blend of technical insights and emotional narratives was no longer just a hope. It was a confident assertion. Amid corporate dialogue surrounding rigid performance metrics, Jake began to navigate the tensions, embracing questions with the knowledge he had cultivated through vulnerability. He was no longer just a mechanic sharing stories. He was a leader crafting a new narrative. The room transformed from a space of criticism to one of collaboration. Participants began to share their experiences, paralleled by the emotional journeys Jake had laid out. Questions about implementation morphed into enthusiastic discussions about real integration strategies. Jake felt the walls between him and the executives begin to crumble, replaced by a spirit of collective ambition. As the discussion flowed, he thrilled at realizing that this journey had changed him. He had conquered the self-doubt that once disabled him. No longer limited by the identity of merely a blue-collar worker, Jake emerged as an advocate with a vision outlined by his lived experiences. He had embraced the empowerment inherent in vulnerability. When the meeting concluded, the atmosphere was electric. The executives remained engaged, nodding appreciatively, and Jake sensed the shifting tide beneath their traditional expectations. One executive leaned forward, Let us take this pilot project and draft a plan for full implementation. Your insights can enhance our team culture." The now encouraging voices confirmed a profound shift. Not only had Jake earned their respect, but he had also facilitated a renewal of purpose within the organization. People were embracing the notion that it was okay to feel, to connect, and to expand their definitions of what success meant. In the days that followed, the pilot program launched successfully, receiving immediate accolades from employees eager to engage in emotional intelligence workshops. Jake saw tangible growth as teams collaborated more openly, employing compassion in every interaction, reshaping the once stagnant corporate culture. Above all, his most significant achievement lay in the relationship with Lily. With each passing day, he became a towering example of perseverance, and she watched as her father not only advocated for a new leadership style but also exemplified it in their daily lives. They talked openly about feelings, empathy, and the impact of their connections, reinforcing the very principles Jake championed in the workplace. Standing in front of a company photograph honoring the first team-wide empathy training, he gazed at smiles reflecting a spirit of belonging. Jake had transformed from a mechanic battling self-doubt into an architect of connection, igniting passion not just in others, but within himself. He realized he had achieved not just professional success but personal fulfillment. What began as a journey to fix engines evolved into one that repaired human hearts. Here, in this moment, Jake found peace, knowing he had proved his worth through compassion. He had redefined his life, gained respect, built a new legacy, and fostered a culture that understood that true strength lies in connection. Do not let this moment pass. You need to subscribe now to the channel for more inspiring stories that can ignite your path to greatness. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm that brings you the next wave of motivational content. We want to hear from you. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Jake's incredible transformation. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how powerful compassion can be in overcoming personal and professional battles. Don't wait even one more second to support.